Hey everyone, it's Jason with Sprinkle with Hope. Just wanted to introduce you guys to this episode. It's going to be an interesting episode. It's really, really good information. We got Zachary Pritchard with us and from Texas. He's going to talk about some finances and some other cool things, but tune in. This is a great episode.
He's got his hand in a lot of things, so it was great to get a lot of perspective on multiple things and not just zone in on one thing. He really does give a lot of great advice on those things that we talk about. So settle in and let's ride.
Welcome to the Sprinkled with Hope podcast.
This is Jason. And this is Shane.
And it's podcast time.
Hey, so welcome to Sprinkle with Hope. This is your host, Jason. We got Zachary Pritchard with us. Zach, thanks for coming on and joining us today. We really appreciate it.
No problem. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you. Would you mind just introducing yourself to our audience so they can kind of get to know you a little bit, give a little bit of background and history? If you would, that'd be awesome.
For sure, yeah. So I run a financial coaching business. And then I also have my own podcast where we just kind of help destroy the self-deception within ourselves. But basically, I worked in the private industry for 6 years in service water management, managing a team, helping growing a multi-million dollar business. And I since left that business and actually was fired from that business. And what's actually come from it is a book that I'm writing on communication. So kind of give you all a little bit of a teaser before we get going here. But so that's kind of where I'm at. I'm getting the coaching started. I love helping people get focused on around their finances and build that foundation so they can build wealth. So
That's awesome. So it sounds like you've got your foot and hand in a lot of different things. That you mentioned a podcast, you mentioned a book, you mentioned financial management, you mentioned communications. That's great. You're really busy man.
I don't like to slow down. When I slow down, that's when things start to fall apart, I should say. So
yeah. Yeah. So where are you coming from? Where are you based out of?
and up in North Texas, north of Dallas.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Very nice.
Awesome. Well, maybe you can talk a little bit about, the financial stuff. You said you got kind of the same where we've got this, what did you call it, the within ourselves that kind of holds us back, or?
Kind of the self-deception.
Yeah, the self-deception, yeah.
Anything that we are deceiving ourselves of that we don't want to see, that we, it's like, or we don't want to admit of ourselves. It's that, and it's kind of the start of my communication book of where it all begins is within ourselves. And how do you communicate with yourself? Do you trust yourself? Do you give yourself empathy? Do you, what is your perspective on your own being, so to speak, and how that portrays outwardly when you communicate with others? But so basically when you, from a financial perspective, we talk about the behavior side, and a lot of people struggle with that behavior of sticking to a budget or just managing that process on a daily, weekly basis or monthly basis. And so that's what I usually break it down and help them to kind of take it from a month-to-month perspective or even a yearly perspective. In some people's mind, they only budget for the year, and so they wonder where all their money is going. But I basically break it down and do, especially the first couple sessions, we're trying to get control of the behavior around it. And then a lot of that is breaking through that deception, the deception of, I have to have a credit card. I have to have, credit score. I can't just pay off my cars or my house or my little student loans, or, you can't live debt free. There's a lot of those deceptions that we place on us because we want what we want, and we have to break through that cycle to become who we want to be instead of just living the normal life, so to speak.
That's awesome. Jason and I have talked about that self-talk, so to say, or the self-deception that you're calling it, that we have to talk to ourselves in some cases even better than we would other people, that we have to take care of ourselves first before we can reach out to help other people. So
Absolutely.
have you just self-taught yourself these concepts, or where did you draw from them?
Yeah, I mean, so growing up, I hated getting in trouble. And so like to the point that I would start crying when my dad would yell at me for doing something. And so it's like I'm trying to figure out like, but why? I kept telling myself, why do I do it when I don't want to do it? Or I know I don't want to get in trouble, so why do I keep doing it? And it just kept playing into the career side. Like, I mean, just as simple as I would put my coffee cup on top of my car, I'd get in and I would drive off and it would break. I had to go buy another one. And so it's like, I know what's going to happen to it. Why can't I stop myself? Why can't I control my behavior to not do that? And so it was that mentality of just not caring, like not being aware of my thought process. And so basically I started just thinking, you know, would tell myself, hey, when you do that, when you have the tendency to do that, to put your cup on the top of the car, then remind yourself what's going to happen and tell yourself, no, I'm going to get it. And it's simple, but I'm going to do it right now. I'm going to do it without, and so started in that process, I really started thinking, hey, I've got to be self-aware with kind of what my thoughts are. And that helps me control my own behavior. And so, and all the while through all this process, I'm, building my own foundation in my finances, paying off my own debt. So I've got to be super budgeting or super dedicated to my budget and sticking to it. And so like there was that, behavior side of it too. Like I tell myself I want to spend X on groceries, then we're going to spend X on groceries.
Yeah.
Now there is a little bit of wiggle room here or there, but I've got clients that may budget $300 in groceries, but they're spending $800 in groceries.
Yeah.
And so there's no balance there.
Yeah. So is there, have you found to be like any kind of, maybe some tools and things that could help people with that budgeting side? I mean, I know for myself, me and my wife go through that budget every month, but is there anything that you have some cool tips or anything like that might help people with budgeting? Or
Yeah, so I think the biggest key is to plan it out. Like, and if you're just starting, and this is I'm actually putting together a short course right now on this behavior side of it, because that's the most struggle people have. But it's gonna give you a short course on how to get started to budgeting. Most people will like. So I guess I'll back up and say, if you're starting right now and you don't budget much, or you have this general budget and it's kind of flowing as you go, and you have a lot of people have some money left over at the end of the month, or I guess I should say at the end of their budget, but then it goes away because they don't have a plan for it. And so what I teach people is to do an every dollar or a zero-based budget. So basically you have your budget, your income at the top, or you have your expenses throughout the middle, and then income minus expenses should equal zero. Now some of that may be savings, some of that may be investing, some of those expenses. So keep it a zero, and that way you know where your money's going each month. Now there is that's where the behavior comes in, because you have to stick to that. You don't have the freedom to just justify going to buy a $500 item when you really don't have the money for it. But what I'm putting together is to get somebody started from point A or from ground zero, and say, how do I train myself to stick to the budget? Because a lot of people, they throw a monthly budget out there and they have no idea if that's even possible. And so some of those steps are, you look back at your last month and you see what am I spending on my groceries? What am I spending on my gas and my, miscellaneous, my, restaurants, whatever it is, what are you spending on those things, so that you can kind of guide your next month's budget of what you're building. And then from there, you're going to take your top three areas that you struggle with and sticking to a budget, and you focus on those for that week, and you say, okay, for today, and this is going back to where, self-awareness of that, I'm pulling that coffee cup down right then. So in today, I'm going to keep myself aware in what I'm thinking, what I'm going through today, and say, okay, I want a Coke from the gas station. No, that I can, but that's going to eat into that, restaurant budget or, miscellaneous budget, whatever it is. or I want to go out to eat tonight, or I want to go out to eat, and then if you do it the first day of the month, then you have all month to not eat out. And so there's no, it just depends on how much you're putting in those budgets and stuff, but it's really just trying to control your mind and your behavior around, basically the self-accountability again. Like, you're trying to have that accountability with yourself. So when you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it. And so I've struggled with that heavily, not necessarily only in the finances, but in just life in general, where, at one point my wife was, had struggled to trust what I was like. I'd tell her I'd do something and it never got done. So, but I have all good intentions, but it was just that
Sure.
it wouldn't work, and it wasn't, me growing. So I didn't do it, but.
Right. Yeah, I think I'm really glad that I have my wife, because she's really good at budgeting, and I would blow our budget completely on travel and going on vacations, and she knows that. So if we balance each other out, I always look at myself and say, well, if we have extra, we can go on a vacation. She's like, calm down, you're gonna blow the budget again. So we balance each other out.
So you're the spender and she's the saver, huh?
I am but we're a good balance.
It must run in the family, because I'm the same way.
And that's where, a lot of times I'm trying to figure out if a couple comes to me, and that's typically what I like to work with, is the new couples that are trying to figure out the communication and stuff. And so what we do is we'll figure out who is the spender, who is the saver, who is the nerd, who is the free spirit, so that you can kind of start to realize kind of where you fit in that relationship. I think we think of a marriage so much like it's disconnected from a company, where as a company you're trying to be unified, figure out where people fit the best. What seat on the bus, as some of the books of, I can't remember the author of that book, but I know he talks about you have to get the right people on the right seat of the bus so that it functions well. And so that's what we got to do in the marriage too. You can't have the free spirit doing the budget, because that just doesn't work.
Exactly. Yeah,
they can help, and they can guide, and they can voice their opinions, but if they're doing it all, then we may have some problems in the long term.
Right. Right. I kind of want to go back to this self-awareness, because we've talked a lot about self-awareness, and I know that we're kind of talking about finances right now, but is there other aspects in our lives that we can use that self-awareness out, other than financial, in the financial world? Or
absolutely. I mean, to dive into my book idea, I mean, part of the to give you a quick intro summary of it, there's what I call 10 characteristics that are all within 4 avenues of communication. So the 4 avenues are your self communication, spousal communication, your team and coworker communication, and then your stranger's communication. So there's those 4 main avenues, and then within those, there's the 10 characteristics. So a couple of them are perspective, trust, expectations, awareness. So being aware of, your personality versus your wife or your team, or, trying to figure those differences out. So when you do communicate, you may come across to one person as very direct and negative, but then the other person's like, heck yeah, I'm all on board. And so, being able to communicate the same message to multiple people, and then with your spouse, like, how are you coming across to her and their perspective? And so being aware is very key in that process of, number one, who you are. It all starts with yourself, because I know I come across to my wife very direct, which means I come across to everybody very direct. And so when I talk to my clients, it's like, I've got to make sure I'm communicating, and they know that I don't mean it in a direct or negative or derogatory way. It's just the way that I'm communicating. Now, can I get better at that? Absolutely. I can start to maybe try and change and say things differently, so that I can, begin to be a better communicator with that person individually. But it's so hard, because everybody's a different person. Everybody's got their different personality, their different, perspective. And, we try and label ourselves with the DISC personality test, or the Enneagrams, and they're great. I love those because it helps you begin to start thinking about who you are and how you think. But you got to understand that even within those, you're still a different person. And so you're still going to receive and give things differently in a communication, in a conversation. So the being self-aware of who you are, where you came up from. I mean, when I do my initial consults or initial sessions for coaching, we talked about what was money for you like growing up? Like, when you were growing up with your parents, did you have a lot of money? Did you struggle? Were you poor, middle class, rich or whatever? Like, because it plays a role in your marriage and your finances, because you're going to look at money as in a similar fashion at that point. And so it's the same as, okay, being self-aware, like from a career or a communication from, your spouse standpoint, how were your parents' marriage when you were younger? Did they talk about marriage? Did they talk about anything? So that's the importance of self-awareness in my eyes. So
Yeah, that's good. I think, our generation, I think, is learning that communication is key to building those relationships. A lot of our parents didn't communicate with those key things. They talked about certain things, but other things were off limits. And I think it's important to be open and honest about everything and have that communication. So I think that's really cool. When do you expect this book to be done?
I'm
Are you
hoping
still
by the
working
end of
on
the
it?
year.
End of the year. Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm kind of I'm getting in touch with some, I don't know what I'll do, self-publish or publish with a publisher or not, but trying to figure that out now so that I can maybe get some pre-sales or I'm going to have a spot on my website that talks about it, and I may even do a free course on the communication so that people can get involved with it and involved with that kind of train, so to speak. So I'm going to have some things going. So I'll be putting that on my website soon so we can kind of keep up with people and keep their interest in it. And so whenever it does come out, then they can grab it then. So
That's great. Very good.
Yeah, I like how you're talking about communication, because I agree with Shane, and I think that communication is really key, and it's, we're losing some of it and we're trying to get better at it. So how would you, put yourself in a situation where you're going to talk to maybe a 5 or a 6-year-old kid. How would you then communicate to a child differently than you would an adult?
Well, I mean, number one, understanding that they don't have the same mindset and the same ability to grasp concepts as you do. So I've got 3 kids. I've got a 10, a just turned 5, and an almost 4-year-old. So I mean, I'm talking to my 5-year-olds like they're supposed to know everything that my 10-year-old knows. And so one thing I've heard and I've been talking about for years is your household is at the stage of your oldest kid. So you're going to talk to all of your kids like you would your 10-year-old, like your oldest kid. And the 3-year-old may struggle with that because they don't understand, and you're going to get mad at them for not doing this or not doing that. But they're like, I don't even know what the word you just said means. And they don't ask, like, what does that mean? They just look at you like, I'm in trouble and I don't want to say anything.
Yeah.
So like, it's trying to break that anger out of us and say, okay, put yourself in their shoes and say, oh, wait, maybe they don't understand what I'm trying to tell them. Maybe they don't understand to pick this up when they're done with it, or, they don't understand some of those concepts. And so having to break that chain and go back into the education of what you would in a newborn and your firstborn baby as they grow up.
And I'm guessing that's the same with concepts when you're talking about adults, when you have to know where they're coming from and a little bit of their perspective even, and just who they are, so that you can communicate more effectively with them, just like you would a 10-year-old or a 3-year-old. They're very different. So
because so when I was building that business or helping build that business, I had guys that, one guy was homeless for several years when he was 14, and just struggled with his marriage. And so he was having marriage issues at home, And then these other guys were, divorced, had child support. So there's all these different avenues outside of the career that would play into my communication with them. So if I said the wrong thing, it may trigger something in them, and then it goes off the wall at that point. And so you gotta know. And then, so my book is really going to hopefully depict that there's not a step-by-step, like, you can get through this process, because it's all intertwined. It's basically a big giant spider web, and having an honest conversation is in the middle, but then all of those avenues and characteristics play in and are all intertwined in that process. And so, but I think the self-awareness is knowing that, hey, they're probably not saying that in that way to piss me off. Like, they're probably pretty good, pretty solid people, and they're just communicating, whether they're aggravated or whatever. They're just communicating, and it's just coming out wrong. I'm hearing it wrong. That's been a big thing in my marriage, is maybe she didn't say it wrong, but maybe I heard it wrong, or vice versa. Maybe I didn't say it wrong, maybe she heard it wrong. And so that's where a lot of anger comes from, is you just assume people said it one way to be derogatory or negative or whatever. So
Yeah, I really like that you brought that up, because I agree. I think communication is both what you say and what you hear, with both, or everybody who's in that communication circle. I think both things are equally important, what you say and what you hear. I'm glad you brought that up. I completely agree with you. That's a good point.
And you talked about it early. Like, I had my fingers or my toes in all different ponds, so to speak. I say that because the company I used to work for was Pond Medics, and then we did a lot of surface water management. So ironic, but anyway. But basically, like, I do have all these kind of feelers and stuff out there that it seems like they're all in different areas, but I think that it all comes back to that self-awareness and that communication. And like, I can tie the communication into finances. I can tie personal finances into careers, like into your business. And because I do a lot of coaching for businesses and their employees, because if their employees are not worried about their finances, then they focus better at work while they're at work, and then they get the job done better, and there's no mistakes and more profit, and client is served better. And so it just exponentially grows the company that way. So I can tie it in, and maybe that's one thing I'm pretty good at, is tying everything into to each other. So finding those connections, I guess.
Yeah, I like that. I really do like that. So question for you: if you could tell your younger self, say back when you were 5, what would you tell yourself now that you didn't know then, or even 10 or whatever? Just what would you tell your younger self?
I think I would say pay attention early. Like, start to think about why you're doing things, and because I'm not old. I'm just turned 30, but then, like, had I been able to kind of know more about myself in high school, I wouldn't have gone to, and this is why I do career coaching with students. This is another pond that I have stuff in there, but because I do career coaching with students to help them kind of find their passion early. And this is all of this is the same thing. So we're tying it back into, hey, who are you? And because I remember people telling you, hey, what do you want to do when you grow up? And so you start thinking about that, and it's like, well, what's fun? And that's what you think about as a high school kid. And so what I thought was fun was, I'm a wildlife management. I have a wildlife management degree. So I thought maybe I'd be out in the, managing deer, turkey, quail, fish. I'd do all that for fun or for a living. And it would be fun. And I still love it to do it as a hobby. But I really didn't see a passion for a business, for a career in that world. And so going back to these students and saying, hey, think about who you are now and what you're good at, what your passions are, so that you can skip that step of having to learn all of it through failures. And not that failures are going to happen, and they're great because they help you grow. But
Right.
You can learn from other people's failures is the big thing. So I guess that's what I would tell you, is trying to be more self-aware as early as you can, and teach your kids that if you're not already. Like,
Right.
ask them who they are. Like, get them to start asking themselves who they are.
That's really good advice. Really good advice. So we have some last questions that we want to ask, and we're going to call it the double down dose. So I have a question about hope, because our podcast is called Sprinkled with Hope. Zach, what does hope mean to you, and how would you define it?
I think for me, hope is everything, because you have to have a why. You have to have something that you're reaching for. Otherwise, you have no motivation to get up in the morning. You have no motivation to change the way you are, to do something different. I used to tell my wife, I was like, well, that's just who I am. Like, I can't change that. Well, I quickly realized I can. But there's got to be hope for something better. And so you just got to look out ahead and say, okay, what am I working for? What am I, what's my family's mission statement? Like, what are we here for? And kind of figure that out, and figure who you are, figure out who you are as a family, who you are as a couple with your spouse. And then go attack it, go get it, and go get your dreams, and reach for it, reach big.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. Reaching big, that's, I think sometimes we settle for small, right? We play small, and that's, we really shouldn't, because we're just limiting ourselves, right? And we're not able to grow. So the second portion of this double down dose is, what is your definition of love, and what would you say about love? What does that mean to you? And
I think, love is being honest, no matter if it's in your marriage, with your kids, with your team at work. You can love them by being open and honest with your failures at work. And because I tried to hide as much as the failures I was doing at my job when I was growing a team, because I was like, I'm the boss. Like, they can't see the mistakes or this and that I'm making, and ultimately they're going to find them, they're going to see them. So talk about it, let them know that it's going to happen. And so it makes them kind of come alive in the sense of, I don't have to be perfect around the boss, and it's the same in the marriage. Like, we can, love is more, it's deeper than just a physical affection. It's deeper than, one of the biggest things that kind of sparked the book was, my wife was, always saying, we never communicate, we never talk. But then we would talk about our kids and jobs and where we're going this weekend every day. Like, that was, we talk about that stuff all the time. And I'm like, I guess me being a guy is like, we talk all the time. What are you talking about? And so that's kind of what sparked this idea of, why are we not communicating? Like, what is communication, and how do you have that honest conversation? So really knowing, how to deepen that relationship is the love part. So, for a lot of guys, it's hard to go to counseling or dig in deep into the relationship, asking about feelings and stuff like that. But if you really talk about that and have that time to sit down, those are those deep conversations. If you're honest with each other, they can really change your relationship for the better.
I love it.
That's really good. I really appreciate that. So you've mentioned a lot of different things that you do. For our listeners, how do they get in contact with you, or how would you let them know ways to find your book and find your podcast and all those things? So this is a way to promote you.
So basically, I think the main two avenues would be, I'm on Facebook. We have, it's all around financial coaching, and I've got stuff going through there all the time. And then just go to the website. It's aafinancialcoaching.com, and I'll have the communication book is going to be up soon. Probably by the time this podcast is aired, we may have most of it put up already. So we'll have, so it's all there. You can find blogs, you can find, my communication blogs that kind of started this conversation or this book topic. So you can find everything there. In those two places, you can find just about everything we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Zach, for sharing today and, talking about your story and giving some really good insight and advice with finances and with just all around being a good team player. I really appreciated, your comments and what you had to say. And thanks for coming on our show. I really appreciate it.
No problem. It was a fun conversation for sure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Zach. Best wishes to you, and get that book out there this year.
Yes, I'm doing my best.
Thanks, Zach.
This is Sprinkled with Hope. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. If you like our podcast, please give us a review or rating.